and will now face sentencing for up to 150 years in prison on June 16th.
Now, we have an all-star panel for you to provide all the angles to this developing story. Joining us now, Fox News anchor and attorney Greg Jarrett, Rick Stone, attorney with Kirby McInerney, which is representing some Madoff victims, Ron Gefter, he's former SEC enforcement officer and partner at Sadis and Goldberg, and Nicholas Casale. Nicholas is a former security guard for Mr. Madoff, whose face I'm sure you have seen many times taking Madoff in and out of his penthouse. Well, Nick, I'm going to begin with you. Nobody has been a fly on the wall like you have. I know there's some things you can't talk about, but knowing Bernie Madoff perhaps better than anybody outside of his immediate family, how would you say he accepted the news today?
Well, I mean, he walked in the courtroom dignified, proud, you know, with a straight face. I mean, he clearly, I watched it just as everybody else. He appeared repentant and maybe remorseful also. But, you know, he went in dignified, and that's the way he should have went in.
Okay, we also have team coverage in Lower Manhattan. Adam Shapiro outside the federal courthouse, and also Sandra Smith, who is front of the Metropolitan Correctional Center, where Bernie Madoff is now being held. Sandra, tell us what the activity is there.
Yeah, well, Liz, we have now confirmed with U.S. Marshals and with the Metropolitan Correction Center that he is no longer just making his way into the facility. Bernie Madoff has now been admitted and checked in and processed at the Metropolitan Correction Center. Well, he will be in a jail cell, a very small jail cell, the typical size of a jail cell inside of the MCC, just about 7 feet by 9 feet large. A typical day that Bernie Madoff will now live, going from penthouse all the way to the jail cell. Lights on, 6 a.m. now for Bernie Madoff. Breakfast call at 6:30 and a work call at 7:45 a.m. The end of the workday is 3:30 p.m. Dinner at 5 and lights out at 11 o'clock at night before they have to rise again at 6 o'clock in the morning. So this is now the typical day of Bernie Madoff after he has now pled guilty to all the charges against him and has now been moved and processed into the Metropolitan Correction Center here in Lower Manhattan for at least the time being until he finds out from the judge where he will be serving the remainder of his time.
Sandra, thank you very much. Let's head now to Adam Shapiro. He is outside the federal courthouse where all the drama took place this morning. Adam.
That's right, and as you heard Sandra said, the next dramatic event in all of this will be the sentencing on June 16th at 1:30 in the afternoon when Mr. Madoff is finally sent to prison. And the victims of Mr. Madoff, who have spoken to Fox Business and some of whom were in the courtroom today, are not happy with the guilty plea. They did not want Judge Chin to accept the guilty plea, hoping that this would they hoped that this would go to trial because they believe that there are other people who knew what Mr. Madoff was up to, that they assisted Mr. Madoff in pulling off the fraud, and they want those people brought to justice as well. It might be interesting, perhaps, I may be mistaken, but I think Mr. Casale actually at some point has done some investigating on this matter. He may be able to shed some light on who may be the target of the U.S. Attorney's investigation now that Mr. Madoff is behind bars. But the latest from Mr. Madoff is that we will not see him again for another 3 months. David, Liz?
Thank you very much. So let's bring in the all-star panel, and I want to start with Fox News anchor and attorney Greg Jarrett. I heard something a little disturbing, Greg, and that is that could he really spend as little, not that 25 years is little, but as little as 25 years in?
I find it hard to believe there would be such outrage among the victims in this case. Now, look, 25 years is still life for a guy who's 70 years old. And he does have a bargaining chip. There was no cooperation agreement today that we know of. But I suspect something is going on. Otherwise, he wouldn't have voluntarily pled guilty to all these counts at a max of 150. He might get something in return down the road that would shave off a little bit of time. Maybe he gets a better facility, a low security rather than a maximum security. And his bargaining chip is he can show the money. Where is it? There's got to be money squirreled away in offshore tax havens. Yeah. I mean, he could invest it in expensive art, in storage facilities in Switzerland. There is stuff out there that victims can get their hands on, and he holds the key. He's probably the only one who can say where it is.
Well, Nicholas, the other bargaining chip he has, of course, is knowing who helped him, because we know he didn't do it alone. Can you shed any light on that, having been with him for so many weeks?
Well, First of all, I don't know about the artwork, and if it's going to be about $70 billion worth of art, as you're saying, it's going to need a large warehouse to store all.
No, I'm not saying $70 billion
yeah.
worth of art, but some money may be invested in things like art.
Again, you're going on the assumption that the total figures are correct. You know, the way you would have to build that out, and I'm just talking my own opinion, nothing that was confidential between myself and the legal team or with the client. But you would have to build up something. You'd have to look at what the principal is of all the monies that were put up and what's remaining now. And that difference would be the total amount of dollars. And when you look at that, and that would be minus any clawbacks of some of the funds that took more money out than they put in. And that would be your population. Right now, they're saying 10 to 17 million. I believe it'll be even smaller.
But, Nick, I want to focus you on what I asked, which is accomplices. That is the other major sticking point that the investigators have to deal with now. Who was helping him out? Do you think Madoff is holding a chip and trying to use it for when somebody targets a member of his family?
Again, we're under the assumption that somebody else did it. Right now, he's saying that there are no other accomplices, and I'm going to have to take him for his word on that.
Why would you take a prolific liar at his word? This man is a pathological liar. He was probably still lying, and prosecutors, by the way, today in court thought he was lying when he said, oh, it didn't begin until the 1990s. They have documents that prove otherwise. He's still lying. Why would you take him at his word?
Again, you know, we're looking to bypass the whole judicial procedure here. Just because the person is incommodious in what he's alleged to have done or heinous.
But it's not alleged anymore.
Well,
he is
you are
guilty.
correct.
He is a crook. He is a criminal. He's a lousy human being. We know it from his own words, and he's admitted so in court. I've got to get you back to the question. Let him answer this question. Right. Don't steer him on another course. What about accomplices?
Again, you know, I would have to say that there are no accomplices. Maybe he you know, perpetrated this scheme by himself. However,
impossible.
There is belief that that would be impossible, and that he would have needed co-conspirators to not only to manage it, but to further it. But again, that's not for him to admit. That's for the government to prove. Oof.
We've got some breaking news here. The acting U.S. attorney in Manhattan says they will bring additional charges against anyone, including Mr. Madoff, quote, as warranted. I want to go to Rick Stone here. Rick, of all the things that have passed over the past couple of days, what jumps out at you as we spin this forward? What is next here? Is it the clawbacks? Is it focusing on the SEC? Is it how do you recover the money?
Well, I think there's several fronts going at once. The U.S. Attorney's Office is going to continue its investigation, and they're going to take lower-level employees at Madoff, like this Annette Bongiorno, who I believe has acknowledged that she had made up phony monthly statements and phony confirmations based on prices to show a monthly return, and they're going to squeeze her. And they're going to say, who told you to do it? Who supervised you? Who cooperated? And they're going to go up the food chain. And I think they're going to go up the food chain to Peter Madoff, because the head of compliance at a brokerage firm would absolutely, positively know whether these confirmations were accurate or inaccurate. This was not some minor differential on a trade confirmation. This was phony trades for 20 years in the billions of dollars. So they're going to steadily build up their evidence without Bernie Madoff, because I do not think, as some of your guests have said, that he is ever going to cooperate at all. He has built a stone wall between himself and his relatives, and he's going to take the fall, and he's not going to cooperate, in my judgment. And that's why he pled. That's why he pled guilty today instead of getting any form of plea agreement. Typically, if there's a plea agreement, it goes on for a period of time. They get cooperation, they get information, they find out where the money is. I don't think any of that's coming from Bernie. So they're going to have to build their case from below, which is typical, squeeze those people and get the information. Annette Bongiorno, Peter Madoff on that front. The clawback's going to take some time. That's a complex case. There are lots of people who are potential defendants in that case that Irving Pickard's going to bring. He's going to pick the cases where he thinks he can win. He may avoid foreign law. He may try to apply New York law. There's all sorts of issues. And he's going to look for the big winners and go after them. He's not going to get everybody. There was an article today in the Wall Street Journal that a lot of those people who think they're subject to clawback are starting to set up asset protection trusts and hide their money. So I think he's going to move relatively quickly, but that's going to take some time to proceed. And then you have the civil litigation, the class action lawsuits against the feeder funds and against potential other participants, brokers, accountants, who led people to Madoff. None of that gets resolved quickly. The most likely next event is information comes from the U.S. Attorney's Office on that process of squeezing lower-level people, and we get additional indictments.
Well, we have additional information from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan, and this is a quote: victims may recover only a small fraction of their losses because of the nature and length of the Madoff scheme. And Ron Geffner, that leads me to ask the question of whether we can trust. We know we can't trust Bernie Madoff. Can we trust the government after all that they missed? In fact, we put it to some of our panelists last night that we gathered in a group of victims of Madoff.